Hi, and welcome to my final project for EDUC 113. This is how I am using technology and how I continue to plan to use technology for the betterment of career and technical education, specifically the welding classes that I teach. Here we see a group of students in a welding class, and you can see that many of them are smiling and are happy to be there, happy to get their hands dirty, and just put some projects together. It's not a class that I was teaching at the time. In fact, I was a student in this class. But what I want to get across here is that many CTE courses, much like welding, need the opportunity for hands on learning so that students can learn the skills needed to enter the industry. And that was no problem up until last year when the world faced a new pandemic. COVID 19. Because of COVID, education across the nation had to come to an emergency stop until online learning could be established. Courses that could be taught 100% online were able to make that transition, but many courses and programs that require hands on learning were either canceled or postponed, and that is until restrictions were lifted or these courses made some changes to offer some sort of distance learning. This goes to show that CTE needs more upgrading in order to operate through future situations like this pandemic. Some courses and skills need hands on no matter what, but in general, we need to do more to transition more of our content to a digital format. And that brings me to my fabrication class. I teach students how to read and interpret blueprints and the many welding symbols that they may encounter, and I have several projects that put the information to use. I also teach students how to use various machines that aid in fabrication and are not covered in conventional welding courses. The picture that you see here is one of my many projects that I give students. This is another project I have students work on, but this is an older version. The newer version is far more appealing to the eye and is more practical, and students can use it on future projects if they manage to build it correctly. It's called a welder square in our class, but in industry, it's called a speed square. This is what a speed square actually looks like. And I don't have my students build an exact replica, but more of a variant that allows for more cutting, more welding, and overall attention to detail. A speed square can be used to measure short distances, and it also allows the user to check parts for squareness. That is, to ensure parts form a 90-degree angle when they are joined. This is the first version of the blueprint that I was using for this project. Long story short, this is what was being used by the teacher before me, and probably the teacher before that. You may not notice anything wrong with it, but to someone who is more knowledgeable on blueprints, they can tell you that it's dated, it lacks other key elements that usually appear on blueprints, and the measurements are a little jumbled and messy. It's just not put together to be user friendly. But I chose to keep using it until I had something better. This is a later version that I drew out and gave to students. It's actually the second version I made. The first was put together with a program called SketchUp, but to be honest, it's not a very good program to make blueprints with, so I ended up trashing that copy. It has a little bit more information on it, and it's to a smaller scale of the original project, which one, saves materials, but it also pushes students to pay more attention to the smaller details. But in the end, it's hand drawn, and it's not something that they would normally encounter, so I had to keep working on it. Since the point of the class is to learn to read and decipher weld symbols, I also have to include examples of these on future blueprints. How else will students learn the skill if their blueprints don't include weld callouts? I tried many various programs to put together projects and blueprints to use in class. I used a program called Autocad, which I'm sure you've heard of or may be familiar with. And let me tell you, if you're a beginner and you're trying to teach yourself how to use these programs, AutoCAD is definitely not for you. For me, it was not user friendly and it was nearly impossible just to grasp the concept of how to put together simple projects. So I ended up ditching that. And I ended up hearing about a program called Autodesk Inventor Pro. And I lucked out. As an educator, you can use the program for free. So I gave it a shot. And after playing around with it, I think I learned enough and grasped the concept on my own to start making smaller projects and working my way up, and of course, building blueprints for each one of those projects. This is the most recent edition of the blueprint for the Welder Square project. Like I mentioned before, it's more appealing to the eye. It's been cleaned up, it's been spread out, it contains multiple views of the project, it has all the crucial dimensions labeled, and it has a lot of the title block information included. Now, even though I've become more proficient at using this program, this blueprint still took me about 2 hours to complete. I have to create all the parts and then assemble them within the program, and then I use that assembly to create the blueprint. Getting the blueprint finished is only a third of the objective. I have to record a demonstration of the project and then upload it so that way my students can access the content. To do all that, I'm going to use a combination of digital tools. I'm going to use a GoPro and my cell phone to record video. I'm going to use a voice recorder on my phone to do some voiceovers. I'm going to use snipping tool for any still shots that I need to take from the video clips. And I'm going to use Adobe Premiere Pro to edit and splice all of my video and audio files. Lastly, I'm going to upload the files to Canvas for my students. And if the video file is too large for Canvas to support, then I'm going to upload it to my YouTube channel and provide a link to it in Canvas. The demonstration I'm recording opens with a brief overview of what the project is. Then I move right along, step by step. I show just how to apply given measurements from the blueprint onto the material given. I then demonstrate a couple different ways to cut the pieces out, then measuring for the next cuts. And again, I show an alternate method that can be used to cut the next pieces. We go through some verification of dimensions, and then it's back to cutting more pieces. And after each new piece is cut, I show them that they need to fit all the pieces together to ensure proper fitting. That way, if there's any modifications that need to be done, like grinding a little bit more on one edge, then they can go ahead and do so, rather than find out at the very end that something happened. Then I bring up preparation for welding and how important it is to make sure that the metal is clean. I demonstrate switching out a flap disc for a wire wheel and how they can do the same thing with a grinding disc. It all depends on how they choose to grind down the material. I express that all they have to do at this point is grind, but the reason why I'm polishing everything now is to save time at the very end of the process. And then I take a far shot of myself welding some pieces together. Then I stress that after every single time they weld something, they have to continuously check the fit up to make sure that the heat that we've put into the pieces from welding hasn't caused the metal pieces to distort or warp or basically change their shape. And after everything is all welded together, I tell them that before welding the last piece onto the project, they need to go ahead and grind their welds here because it's going to be easier to do it now rather than later. And I also discuss that it's also the opportune time to polish everything at this point instead of wait until the final piece is put on, because then it's going to be a little bit harder to polish everything. Once we get to the very final step, welding on that last piece, I tell them enough direction on how to get it done, but ultimately I leave the choice to them. I want to see them get a little creative with how they attach the last piece. And here's where my demonstration pretty much stops. I have a little bit more video that I've shot. I haven't been able to edit it yet, but here's a picture of what the end project looks like. And I still have to go through and polish up the remaining areas on my project, but essentially this is what they're building. And after all the demonstration segments have been recorded, it's time to start editing. So I sit down at my computer. I just have a laptop. It's not really made for editing video, but I make do with it. I have to open up Adobe Premiere Pro and dump all the video files into it. I have to go through, make sure all the clips are in the right order, cut out all the unnecessary parts, just to make sure that the students get, the meat and potatoes of what the project is and how to do it. I find the areas where the background noise is a little too loud, and I'll record some voiceover, and then I'll edit that into the segments as well. And once everything is done, I save the project, and then I export it. and then I upload it to Canvas, or at least I'll try. I'll find out if the file is too large to be supported by Canvas. If so, I just throw it up into my YouTube channel and provide a link for my students in the Canvas module. And that is how I'm going to use technology to better my classes, and hopefully other instructors will catch on and continue this sort of process to improve their classes, and eventually we'll see huge improvements and huge leaps in the world of CTE.